The late afternoon sun casts long, golden shadows across the marble floor of the library in Alexandria. Dust motes dance slowly in the beams of light that filter through the high, arched windows. The air smells faintly of dried papyrus, old leather bindings, and the salt from the nearby Mediterranean Sea. A single bronze lamp sits on a low table, its flame flickering gently without casting any harsh movement. The silence of the room is profound, broken only by the distant rhythmic sound of waves lapping against the stone quay. Scholars move quietly between the towering shelves, their sandals making soft, muffled sounds on the cool mosaic tiles. A scroll lies unrolled on a reading desk, its ink faded to a soft brown against the pale parchment. The text describes the stars and the movements of the planets with careful, deliberate strokes. Outside, the city hums with a low, steady energy. Yet inside the library, time seems to stand still. The walls are adorned with simple geometric patterns that invite the eye to rest and the mind to wander. A small statue of a seated philosopher watches over the room with a calm, unblinking gaze. The light shifts imperceptibly as the sun moves lower in the sky, warming the stone columns. This space is a sanctuary of knowledge where the great works of the past are preserved and studied. The atmosphere is one of deep contemplation and peaceful order, far removed from the turmoil of the outside world. I stand here now, long after the hands that held these scrolls have turned to dust. The weight of the crown feels light, almost forgotten, as the memory of the forum fades into the background. There was a time when the world seemed to turn on my command, when the legions marched in perfect step, and the maps were drawn with a ruler's precision. The conquest of Gaul provided the material basis for the administrative reforms I later implemented. Yet the true work was often done in quiet rooms like this one. The rapid communication of news helped to unify the diverse populations under Roman rule, binding the empire together with threads of ink and stone. I remember the smell of the ink, the scratch of the reed pen against the papyrus, the feeling of the sun on my face as I walked the streets of a city that was changing before my eyes. The civic crown remained a symbol of the personal courage that underpinned my public life, but it was the quiet diligence of the surveyors that truly shaped the world. They measured the earth with a precision that allowed for a level of accuracy previously unseen in Roman geography. Their work connected the distant provinces to the heart of Rome through a shared understanding of space. The dedication of the chroniclers ensured that these stories would be preserved for future generations, even as the world itself shifted and changed. The relationship with Cleopatra added a layer of cultural richness to the political achievements of those days. It was a time of great expansion, of new ideas and old traditions colliding in the marketplace of the mind. The framework for Roman administration and expansion was built on the backs of countless unnamed workers and scholars. The late afternoon sun continues to cast its golden light, illuminating the dust that settles on the shelves. The silence of the room is a comfort, a reminder that all things eventually find their rest. The legacy of these works continues to inform our understanding of the ancient world today, a testament to the enduring nature of human ambition and the quiet power of the written word. I have walked these halls in my mind 1,000 times, retracing the steps of a life that once seemed so urgent, so necessary. Now there is only the light, the dust, and the gentle sound of the waves against the stone. The world has moved on, but the questions remain, hanging in the air like the scent of old parchment. It is a peace I have sought for a lifetime, a silence that finally allows the mind to settle, to drift away from the chaos of the past and into the stillness of memory. The fire in the hearth has burned low, leaving only the soft, rhythmic crackle of embers. Outside, the rain falls gently against the stone walls of the villa, a sound that has echoed through centuries, washing away the dust of battle and the noise of the forum. Here, in this quiet moment, the weight of the toga feels lighter, the burden of the laurel crown less pressing. I am not the general, nor the dictator, nor the conqueror of Gaul. I am simply a man resting, listening to the rhythm of the world as it turns without my command. The air is cool, carrying the scent of damp earth and old parchment. It is a peace I have sought for a lifetime, a silence that finally allows the mind to settle, to drift away from the chaos of Rome and into the stillness of memory. The fire in the hearth has burned low, leaving only the soft, rhythmic crackle of embers. Outside, the rain falls gently against the stone walls of the villa, a sound that has echoed through centuries, washing away the dust of battle and the noise of the forum. Here, in this quiet moment, the weight of the toga feels lighter, the burden of the laurel crown less pressing. I am not the general, nor the dictator, nor the conqueror of Gaul. I am simply a man resting, listening to the rhythm of the world as it turns without my command. The air is cool, carrying the scent of damp earth and old parchment. It is a peace I have sought for a lifetime, a silence that finally allows the mind to settle, to drift away from the chaos of Rome and into the stillness of memory. My earliest memories are not of marble palaces or golden chariots, but of the narrow, winding streets of the Suburra, where the air was thick with the smoke of cooking fires and the shouts of merchants. I was born into a family that claimed descent from the goddess Venus, yet we were not wealthy, nor were we among the most powerful in the Senate. My father, Gaius Julius Caesar, was a man of moderate means, and my mother, Aurelia, was the anchor of our household. She was a woman of immense strength and intellect, and her influence on my character was profound. She taught me that dignity was not given by birth, but earned through conduct. The political landscape of my youth was volatile. The Republic was fracturing under the weight of its own expansion. The Gracchid brothers had been murdered, their reforms crushed by the conservative faction, and the streets of Rome ran with the blood of political rivals. I watched these events with a keen eye, understanding early that power was a fragile thing, easily shattered by a single wrong word or a misplaced step. The house we lived in was modest, built of rough stone and plaster, with a small courtyard where the light fell in sharp, geometric patterns. My mother moved through these rooms with a deliberate grace, her footsteps silent on the packed earth floor. She ensured that my education was rigorous, hiring tutors who spoke with the precision of orators and the clarity of philosophers. They taught me the classics, the art of speaking to a crowd, and the laws that held the city together. I remember the feel of the wax tablets under my fingers, the sharp scent of the stylus, and the way the dust motes danced in the single beam of sunlight that pierced the dark room. These lessons were not merely academic. They were the foundation upon which a life would be built. I learned to listen before I spoke, to observe before I acted, and to hold my ground when the world tried to push me aside. At the age of 16, the world I knew changed forever. My father died suddenly, leaving a silence in the house that no amount of noise could fill. The loss was sharp and immediate, like a stone thrown into a still pond. In the wake of this grief, I was nominated for the priesthood of Jupiter, an honor that placed me at the center of the religious and political life of Rome. It was a position of great prestige, yet it also made me a target. The dictator Sulla, a man whose face was etched with the lines of a long and bloody career, viewed me with deep suspicion. He demanded that I divorce my wife, Cornelia, the daughter of his rival Cinna. The command was delivered with a coldness that chilled the air in the room. I refused to comply. The refusal was not a grand gesture of rebellion, but a quiet, stubborn adherence to a promise I had made to myself and to her. The cost was high. I lost the priesthood, the dowry, and the safety of my home. I was forced to flee into the hills, living as a fugitive while the city I loved burned with political fire. The years in hiding were long and filled with uncertainty, yet they were also a time of deep reflection. I walked the roads of the countryside, feeling the rough stone under my sandals and hearing the wind rustle through the olive trees. I learned that survival often required a different kind of strength than the kind needed for battle. It required patience, silence, and the ability to disappear into the landscape. I returned to Rome when the political tides turned, but the scars of that time remained. They taught me that the world could change in an instant, and that the only thing one could truly control was one's own response to the chaos. The lesson was hard-won, but it shaped the man I would become. It taught me that dignity was not a gift from the state, but a quality of the soul that could not be taken away by force or decree. The sun began to set over the hills of Rome, casting long, golden shadows across the ancient stone buildings. The light filtered through the dust of the street, illuminating the faces of the people who moved with purpose and urgency. A single bronze lamp sat on a low table, its flame flickering gently, without casting any harsh movement. The air smelled faintly of dried papyrus, old leather bindings, and the salt from the nearby Mediterranean Sea. The silence of the room was profound, broken only by the distant, rhythmic sound of waves lapping against the stone quay. Scholars moved quietly between the towering shelves, their sandals making soft, muffled sounds on the cool mosaic tiles. A scroll lay unrolled on a reading desk, its ink faded to a soft brown against the pale parchment. The text described the stars and the movements of the planets with careful, deliberate strokes. Outside, the city hummed with a low, steady energy. Yet inside the library, time seemed to stand still. The walls were adorned with simple geometric patterns that invited the eye to rest and the mind to wander. A small statue of a seated philosopher watched over the room with a calm, unblinking gaze. The light shifted imperceptibly as the sun moved lower in the sky, warming the stone columns. This space was a sanctuary of knowledge where the great works of the past were preserved and studied. The atmosphere was one of deep contemplation and peaceful order, far removed from the turmoil of the outside world. In those formative years, I learned that the world was vast and complex, filled with forces beyond my control. Yet, within that vastness, there was a pattern, a rhythm that could be understood and respected. The political upheaval, the loss of my father, the flight from Rome, all of it was part of a larger design. I did not understand it fully then, but the seeds of wisdom were planted in the soil of my youth. They grew slowly, fed by the experiences of a life lived on the edge of danger and the quiet moments of reflection that followed. The man who would one day reshape the foundations of the Republic was forged in the fires of these early years. He was not born a conqueror, but he became one through the accumulation of small, deliberate choices. Each choice was a step on a path that led to the edge of the known world. The journey was long and fraught with peril, but the destination was worth the price. The cost was paid in blood and tears, but the reward was a legacy that would endure for centuries. The story of my life is the legions found a strange comfort in the ink that flowed from my pen, a quiet rhythm amidst the chaos of marching boots and clashing steel. I wrote commentaries on those long campaigns to preserve the memory of victories that would otherwise fade into the dust of time. These texts were crafted with a clarity that hid the intricate complexity of the strategies they described, making the impossible seem like a simple path. My handwriting remained steady even as my body began to show the heavy signs of advanced age, a stubborn defiance against the weakening of my limbs. I suffered from occasional fainting spells that worried my closest friends and most loyal advisors, yet I continued to work with a diligence that surprised those who expected me to rest. The Senate granted me the title of dictator for life, a move that unsettled many traditionalists who feared the old ways were dying. They believed my power had grown too great and that the fragile balance of the Republic was in danger of collapse. A group of senators began to plot against me in the shadows of the marble halls, their whispers soft and dangerous. They believed that my death was the only way to restore the balance of power to the state and save the institutions they cherished. The Ides of March arrived with a cool wind that swept through the streets of the city, carrying a chill that seemed to settle in the bones. I walked toward the theater of Pompey, where the Senate was scheduled to meet that day, my steps measured and calm. I was accompanied by my friend Decimus Brutus, who had played a key role in the conspiracy that waited within the portico. The atmosphere was heavy with unspoken tension as the senators gathered, their faces masks of feigned concern and friendship. I entered the room and took my seat upon the golden chair prepared for me, the wood warm beneath the fabric of my toga. The conspirators moved closer, their hands hidden behind their sleeves, their eyes avoiding my gaze. They surrounded me and struck with their daggers in a sudden and violent attack that ended the day in blood. I fell to the floor, my life ending in a pool of blood on the stone, the cold seeping into my skin as the light faded. The Ides of March and my assassination marked the end of an era and the beginning of a long, chaotic struggle for the soul of Rome. My body lay still while the senators fled in panic, leaving the hall in disarray and the air thick with the scent of iron. The news of my death spread quickly through the city, causing shock and grief among the populace, who had looked to me for stability. The people wept for the man who had promised them peace and order in uncertain times, their voices rising in a collective lament. My death left a void that no single individual could easily fill in the years that followed, a silence where my voice once commanded the legions. The empire that would rise from the ashes had to withstand the pressures of imperial ambition and the constant threat of civil war. My life and death remain central to understanding this pivotal moment in Western history, a turning point where the Republic became an empire. The sources available to modern historians often contain gaps or uncertainties regarding specific details of daily life and the private moments of rest. Some texts focus on the Claudian family rather than providing a complete account of my early years, leaving the edges of the story blurred. Other documents consist of corrupted data or fragmented streams that offer no readable narrative content, forcing scholars to piece together the truth from shards. The siege of Alesia in 52 BCE remains a well-documented military achievement despite the lack of specific details about my rest habits during those long nights. The Alexandrian War of 47 BCE also lacks explicit records of my nocturnal activities in the surviving texts, leaving those hours to the imagination. These gaps remind us that the personal routines of ancient leaders are often lost to the passage of time, swallowed by the silence of history. The broader political context, however, is well established through multiple independent sources and archaeological evidence that survives the erosion of centuries. The fall of the Republic was a gradual process driven by structural weaknesses and individual ambitions that pushed the system beyond its breaking point. It was a time when the boundaries between public duty and private gain became increasingly blurred, eroding the foundations of the state. The legacy of this era continues to influence modern understandings of power, leadership, and political stability, echoing through the halls of governments today. The quiet library of a Roman villa offered a sanctuary from the chaos of the city streets outside, a place where the mind could rest. Dust motes danced in the shafts of afternoon. Light that filtered through the high clerestory windows, moving with a slow, graceful rhythm. A single oil lamp sat, unlit upon a polished marble table, waiting for the evening to bring its soft, flickering glow. The walls were adorned with frescoes depicting serene landscapes of the Italian countryside and distant mountains, painted in muted greens and blues. A bronze bust of a philosopher gazed thoughtfully toward the garden where cypress trees stood in solemn rows, their dark shapes contrasting with the pale stone. The air smelled faintly of dried lavender and the cool stone of the floor beneath bare feet, a scent that calmed the restless spirit. Outside, the distant sound of a water wheel turning provided a rhythmic and soothing background noise, a constant reminder of the flow of time. A scroll lay half unrolled on a wooden stand, its ink still dark and the words clear to the eye, waiting to be read. The room felt suspended in time, a place where the mind could rest and the spirit could find peace away from the demands of the world. The conquest of Gaul would further showcase my strategic genius and my ability to adapt to changing circumstances in the face of fierce resistance. The campaigns in Gaul required not only military prowess, but also the skill to manage vast territories and diverse populations with a steady hand. I documented these events in my commentaries, which remain models of clear and concise historical writing that guide the pen of historians still. The text I produced provided a detailed account of the wars, while also serving as a piece of political propaganda to shape the narrative of my rule. These writings revealed my deep understanding of geography, logistics, and the psychology of both allies and enemies who stood against the legions. The absence of detailed records regarding specific major artistic works suggests my primary medium was action and governance rather than the chisel or the brush. My legacy was built upon the tangible results of my policies and the clarity of my written accounts that survived the fires of war. The style of my prose mirrored the decisive nature of my character and my approach to problem solving, moving with purpose and precision. I favored a narrative that moved forward with purpose and avoided unnecessary digressions or emotional outbursts that would cloud the truth of events. This literary technique ensured that my version of events remained the dominant historical narrative for centuries, shaping how the world saw Rome. The influence of my writing style can be seen in the works of later historians who sought to emulate my clarity and directness in their own accounts. My ability to synthesize complex situations into understandable narratives was a rare talent in the ancient world, a gift that served me well in war and peace. The training I received in rhetoric and law provided the foundation for this unique form of expression that combined logic with vision. I combined the precision of a lawyer with the vision of a general to create a new standard for historical documentation that endured through the ages. The impact of my early education and my subsequent experiences created a leader who could navigate both peace and war with equal skill and determination. My life story became a testament to the power of resilience and the importance of maintaining one's principles under the crushing pressure of ambition. The artistic development of my character was not marked by traditional art, but by the art of leadership and statecraft that reshaped a nation. I shaped the destiny of Rome through a combination of force, diplomacy, and the written word, weaving these threads into a new tapestry. The lessons learned in my youth guided my actions throughout my entire career as a statesman and general, a compass that never failed. My refusal to yield to Sulla set a precedent for my future resistance against tyranny and political oppression that defined my character. The prediction made by Sulla proved accurate as the stone under my feet grew warm as the sun began its slow descent toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the forum where the air still hummed with the echoes of a day spent in debate. I remember the weight of the consulship settling onto my shoulders not as a burden of gold, but as a heavy woolen cloak that required constant adjustment against the chill of political uncertainty. The city around me was a living thing, breathing in the scents of roasting meat from the markets and the sharp tang of unwashed bodies pressed together in the crowded streets. I walked through these lanes with a mind focused on the delicate web of alliances that held the Republic together, knowing that one wrong step could unravel years of careful planning. The great Pompey stood tall and imposing, his presence commanding respect even from those who feared his power, while Crassus moved with a quiet, calculating grace that hid vast fortune beneath a simple exterior. We three, bound by mutual need and shared ambition, formed a pact that would reshape the very foundations of the world we knew. It was a time of deep contemplation for me, where the noise of the crowds faded into a background hum, allowing me to hear the subtle rhythms of strategy and survival. I looked back on my early years in the Subara, where the streets were narrow and the air thick with the smoke of cooking fires, a stark contrast to the marble halls I now inhabited. My mother, Aurelia, had taught me that dignity was not given by birth but earned through conduct, a lesson that guided my every move in the Senate. The political landscape had been volatile since the days of Sulla, who had shown how a single man could dominate the government through sheer force and terror. I had refused to divorce my wife, Cornelia, despite the dictator's demands, an act of stubbornness that cost me my priesthood but solidified my resolve. That early defiance set the tone for a life spent navigating dangerous waters, building alliances, and securing loyalty from the common people and the legions. The memory of that refusal still lingers, a quiet anchor in the storm of my later years, reminding me that some lines cannot be crossed without losing oneself. The alliance with Pompey and Crassus was not merely a political maneuver, but a convergence of three distinct forces, each bringing something essential to the table. Pompey brought the prestige of his eastern conquests, his name a thunderclap that silenced opposition, while Crassus provided the financial muscle necessary to fund the grand ambitions we shared. I brought the support of the people and a vision of a new order, one that would rise from the ashes of the old republic. Together, we moved through the corridors of power with a steady hand, our steps synchronized by a shared understanding of what needed to be done. The Senate watched us with suspicion, their eyes narrowing as they sensed the shift in the balance of power. But they could do little to stop the tide. I felt the eyes of the crowd upon me, a mixture of hope and fear, as I stepped forward to lead them into this new era. The air in the Senate House was thick with tension, the scent of beeswax candles mingling with the sweat of anxious senators. As the consulship progressed, the reality of governing a fractured republic became clear, requiring a level of flexibility and cunning that I had honed since my youth. I remembered the storming of Mytilene, where I had earned the civic crown for my valor, a symbol of the respect I commanded among my peers in Asia. That honor was a distant memory now, yet it served as a reminder of the courage required to face the unknown. The historian Suetonius would later document these lives with a mix of fact and rumor, dedicating his work to his patron, Septicius Clarus, illustrating the enduring importance of patronage in Roman literary culture. Suetonius himself was a friend and protégé of Pliny the Younger, a connection that ensured the survival of these records for future generations to study carefully. His work included gossip and scandal relating to my life, providing a human dimension to the otherwise distant figure of the dictator. Despite some texts focusing on other families like the Claudiae, the core narrative remains centered on the events of this time. The decision to lead the conquest of Gaul was not made lightly, but it was a necessity born of the political climate and the need to secure my position. The legions were ready, their spirits high and their loyalty unwavering, eager to follow me into the unknown territories beyond the Alps. The Remi tribes surrendered to me early in the campaign, offering essential supplies like corn that sustained my vast armies across distant lands. These local alliances were crucial, a testament to the power of diplomacy even in the midst of war. I walked through the forests of Gaul, the air crisp and filled with the scent of pine and damp earth, listening to the sounds of the legions marching in formation. The landscape was vast and untamed, a challenge that tested the limits of my leadership and the endurance of my men. I felt the weight of the responsibility, knowing that every decision would echo through history. One specific fact often overlooked by those who study these events is that the Roman calendar was so lunar at the time that the year of my consulship was actually 355 days long, a chaotic adjustment made to realign the seasons with the agricultural cycle. This detail, buried in the dry records of the pontiffs, reveals the practical struggles of maintaining order in a world governed by the stars and the soil. The sun moved across the sky with a rhythm that did not always match the human need for structure, and it was my duty to impose that structure upon the chaos. I remember the long nights spent reviewing the calendar, the oil lamp flickering as I tried to make sense of the discrepancies. The task was tedious, yet it was essential for the stability of the empire we sought to build. The relationships formed during this period were complex and multifaceted, weaving a tapestry of loyalty and betrayal that would define the rest of my life. I maintained a profound familial tie with my great nephew Octavian, who would later become Emperor Augustus, an adoption that established a direct line of succession reshaping the Roman world forever. This bond was not merely political, but deeply personal, a connection that transcended the cold calculations of power. I also formed a significant alliance with Cleopatra, the Queen of Egypt, which extended my influence into the Eastern Mediterranean. Our relationship combined political strategy with personal affection during a turbulent period in history, a partnership that defied the conventions of the time. The legacy of these relationships endured long after the individuals themselves had passed from the world, a testament to the power of human connection in shaping history. The quiet study of these bonds offers a peaceful reflection on the nature of leadership, a reminder that even the greatest men are bound by the ties of kinship and friendship. The late Roman Republic existed as a fragile political entity defined by intense competition among powerful families, and I navigated these dangerous waters with a steady hand. The state relied on a complex system of checks and balances that gradually failed under the weight of internal strife. And I was both a product of that system and its undoing. The silence around my sleep habits does not diminish the reality of my humanity, for I was a man who sought rest in the same way as any other. The world outside continued its slow rotation, unaware of the sleep of its leader, and in that stillness I found a temporary peace before the dawn. The shadows danced softly against the plaster walls as the flame flickered in the draught, a quiet moment that offered a brief respite from the chaos of the forum and the battlefield. The dust of the Gallic roads settled into the folds of my tunic, a gritty reminder of the long marches that stretched from the Rhine to the ocean. I remember the chill of the northern winds cutting through the armor, a sharp contrast to the warmth of the Italian sun. The forests there were ancient and deep, their canopies so thick that they seemed to swallow the sky itself. I walked those paths with a mind sharpened by the need to survive, to adapt to a landscape that refused to yield easily. The campaigns required more than just the strength of a legion. They demanded a constant shifting of strategy, a fluidity of thought that mirrored the rivers we crossed. I learned to read the terrain as a general reads a map, seeing the hidden valleys and the treacherous passes before the enemy even knew they existed. The people I encountered were diverse, their languages a jumble of sounds that I had to learn to parse with care. Some tribes were fierce warriors, while others were farmers who tilled the soil with a patience I admired. I documented these events in my commentaries, writing with a clarity that stripped away the confusion of war. The text flowed from my hand with a purpose, a deliberate construction of words that would outlast the swords that forged them. These writings were not merely records of battles. They were a testament to the geography, the logistics, and the complex psychology of allies and foes. I saw the world through the lens of a lawyer, dissecting every situation with precision, and the vision of a general seeing the grand strategy in every skirmish. The style of my prose mirrored the decisive nature of my character, moving forward without unnecessary digressions or emotional outbursts. This literary technique ensured that my version of events remained the dominant narrative for centuries, shaping how the world understood the conquest of Gaul. The influence of this writing can be seen in the works of later historians who sought to emulate my clarity. My ability to synthesize complex situations into understandable narratives was a rare talent in the ancient world. The training I received in rhetoric and law provided the foundation for this unique form of expression. I combined the precision of a lawyer with the vision of a general to create a new standard for historical documentation. The impact of my early education and my subsequent experiences created a leader who could navigate both peace and war with equal skill. My life story became a testament to the power of resilience and the importance of maintaining one's principles under pressure. The artistic development of my character was not marked by traditional art, but by the art of leadership and statecraft. I shaped the destiny of Rome through a combination of force, diplomacy, and the written word. The lessons learned in my youth guided my actions throughout my entire career as a statesman and general. My refusal to yield to Sulla set a precedent for my future resistance against tyranny and political oppression. The prediction made by Sulla proved accurate, as my rise fundamentally altered the structure of the Roman Republic. The civic crown remained a symbol of my early courage and my willingness to risk my life for others. My campaigns in Gaul demonstrated the full extent of my strategic vision and my ability to inspire loyalty. The clarity of my writing ensured that my perspective would endure long after my death. The synthesis of my military, political, and literary achievements created a legacy that defined an era. My life served as a model for future leaders who sought to balance power with responsibility. The artistic development of my persona was complete when I became the central figure in the transformation of Rome. The quiet strength I displayed in my youth foreshadowed the monumental changes I would bring to the world. My story remains a powerful example of how personal conviction can shape the course of history. The stone walls of the encampment stood silent under the pale moonlight, their rough surfaces softened by the silver glow. A single torch flickered in the center of the courtyard, casting long, dancing shadows against the wooden palisades. The air was cool and still, carrying the faint scent of wood smoke and the damp earth of the Gallic soil. Distant sounds of the night birds echoed through the valley, a rhythmic chorus that lulled the weary soldiers into a shallow sleep. A leather tent flap stirred gently in the breeze, revealing a glimpse of the straw mattress inside where a centurion lay resting. The silence was deep and comforting, broken only by the occasional snore of a sleeping man, or the rustle of a horse shifting in its stall. Dust motes danced slowly in the beam of light, moving with a grace that seemed to ignore the passage of time. The camp felt suspended in a moment of perfect peace, far removed from the chaos of the battlefield or the politics of Rome. It was a space designed for rest, where the mind could wander freely without the weight of command pressing down upon it. The stars above were bright and clear, a vast canopy that watched over the sleeping army with a silent, ancient gaze. I navigated a complex web of personal and political bonds that defined my era. I maintained a profound familial tie with my great-nephew Octavian, who later became Emperor Augustus. This adoption established a direct line of succession that would reshape the Roman world forever. I also formed a significant alliance with Cleopatra, the Queen of Egypt, which extended my influence across the Mediterranean. Our relationship combined political strategy with personal affection during a turbulent period in history. In the military sphere, I led the Roman conquest of Gaul with decisive authority and skill. During these campaigns, the Remi tribe surrendered to me and offered essential supplies like corn. These local alliances were crucial for sustaining my vast armies across distant territories. My early career saw me earn the civic crown for valor at the storming of Mytilene. This honor reflected the respect I commanded among my peers and superiors in Asia. The historian Suetonius later documented these lives with a mix of fact and rumor. Suetonius dedicated his work, De Vita Caesarum, to his own patron, Septicius Clarus. This dedication illustrates the enduring importance of patronage in Roman literary culture. Suetonius himself was a friend and protégé of the official Pliny the Younger. Such mentorships ensured that historical records survived for future generations to study carefully. The work of Suetonius included gossip and scandal relating to the life of Julius Caesar. These anecdotes provided a human dimension to the otherwise distant figure of the dictator, despite some texts focusing on other families like the Claudi. The core narrative remains centered on Caesar. Other sources discuss the Claudian family and Tiberius rather than the life of the great leader. The absence of detailed records regarding specific major artistic works suggests that my primary medium was action and governance. My legacy was built upon the tangible results of my policies and the clarity of my written accounts. The style of my prose mirrored the decisive nature of my character and my approach to problem solving. I favored a narrative that moved forward with purpose and avoided unnecessary digressions or emotional outbursts. This literary technique ensured that my version of events remained the dominant historical narrative for centuries. The influence of my writing style can be seen in the works of later historians who sought to emulate my clarity. my ability to synthesize complex situations into understandable. Narratives was a rare talent in the ancient world. The training I received in rhetoric and law provided the foundation for this unique form of expression. I combined the precision of a lawyer with the vision of a general to create a new standard for historical documentation. The impact of my early education and my subsequent experiences created a leader who could navigate both peace and war with equal skill. My life story became a testament to the power of resilience and the importance of maintaining one's principles under pressure. The artistic development of my character was not marked by traditional art, but by the art of leadership and statecraft. I shaped the destiny of Rome through a combination of force, diplomacy, and the written word. The lessons learned in my youth guided my actions. Throughout my entire career as a statesman and general, my refusal to yield to Sulla set a precedent for my future resistance against tyranny and political oppression. The prediction made by Sulla proved accurate as my rise fundamentally altered the structure of the Roman Republic. The civic crown remained a symbol of my early courage and my willingness to risk my life for others. My campaigns in Gaul demonstrated the full extent of my strategic vision and my ability to inspire loyalty. The clarity of my writing ensured that my perspective would endure long after my death. The synthesis of my military, political, and literary achievements created a legacy that defined an era. My life served as a model for future leaders who sought to balance power with responsibility. The artistic development of my persona was complete when I became the central figure in the transformation of Rome. The quiet strength I displayed in my youth foreshadowed the monumental changes I would bring to the world. My story remains a powerful example of how personal conviction can shape the course of history. It is a strange fact that the human brain, even in the midst of absolute chaos, continues to process the concept of time as a linear progression, regardless of the chaos of war. This mental continuity allowed me to plan campaigns years in advance, seeing the end of the war before the first sword was drawn. The ability to hold such a long view was a gift that I used to guide the fate of nations. I faced a civil war against my former ally Pompey in the Senate. This bold move shattered the remaining legal constraints on military power and plunged Rome into years of conflict. The river flowed dark and silent beneath the moonlight, a thin black line dividing the known world from the unknown. I stood on the bank, feeling the cold mist rise from the water to touch my face, carrying the scent of wet stone and distant pine. My legions waited in the shadows, their armor gleaming faintly in the pale glow, silent as the grave itself. The decision had been made long before this moment, in the quiet chambers of the mind, where fear and ambition wrestle in the dark. To cross was to accept that the laws of the Republic were now mere suggestions, fragile things that could be broken by a single step. I remembered the words of the soothsayers, the warnings of omens that seemed to point toward disaster. Yet the pull of destiny was stronger than any fear. The bridge was not made of wood or stone, but of intent, a threshold that could never be uncrossed once passed. My hand trembled slightly as I reached out to touch the rough bark of an olive tree near the water's edge. Grounding myself in the physical reality of the moment, the soldiers looked to me, their eyes wide with a mixture of terror and unwavering loyalty, waiting for the signal that would change history forever. I stepped forward, the water lapping at my sandals, cold and sharp against my skin, and felt the weight of the world shift on my shoulders. The river was shallow here, barely reaching the knee, but it felt as deep as the ocean, separating the man I was from the man I would become. The crossing was not a battle of swords or shields, but a battle of will against the inertia of tradition, a quiet revolution that began with a single footfall. The water rushed past, carrying with it the leaves of autumn and the secrets of the past, washing away the old ways of the Republic. My men followed in a long, silent column. The sound of their boots on the riverbed, a rhythmic drumbeat that echoed through the valley. They did not speak, for there were no words for what they were doing, only the shared understanding that they were leaving the safety of the known behind. The night was clear, the stars bright and unblinking above. Watching the march with an ancient indifference that was both comforting and terrifying, I thought of the Senate in Rome, sitting in their marble halls, unaware that the foundation of their power was already crumbling beneath the weight of a river crossing. The air grew colder as we moved away from the water, the wind picking up and rustling the dry grass around our feet. We marched through the darkness, guided only by the moon and the faint glow of torches carried by the scouts ahead. The journey was long and arduous, but the spirit of the army was unbroken, fueled by the promise of a new order and the vision of a Rome that would never be the same. The roads were rough and uneven, filled with stones and mud that slowed our progress, yet we pressed on with a determination that defied the elements. My own body felt the strain of the march, the aches of old wounds flaring up in the damp air. But I pushed through the pain with a steady resolve. The fainting spells that had begun to trouble me in recent months were a constant reminder of my mortality, a whisper of the end that waited for us all. Yet I continued to lead, to write, to plan, driven by a need to leave something lasting behind before the darkness took me. The legions across the Rubicon now found solace in the written word, for in the chaos of war, the clarity of ink provided a strange kind of peace. I wrote commentaries on these campaigns, my hand moving steadily across the parchment. Despite the tremors that sometimes shook my limbs, these texts were composed with a precision that masked the complexity of the strategies they described, reducing the madness of war to neat lines of logic. My friends and advisors worried when I collapsed in the study, my body giving way to the exhaustion of a life lived at full speed. But I always rose again to finish the work. The Senate granted me the title of dictator for life, a move that unsettled the old families who feared the end of their ancient privileges. They whispered in the shadows of the marble halls, their faces tight with anxiety as they plotted against the man who had become too powerful to ignore. A group of senators began to weave a net of betrayal, believing that my death was the only way to restore the balance of power to the state. The Ides of March arrived with a cool wind that swept through the streets of the city, carrying the scent of rain and the faint smell of burning incense from the temples. I walked toward the theater of Pompey, where the Senate was scheduled to meet that day, accompanied by my friend Decimus Brutus, who had played a key role in the conspiracy. The atmosphere was heavy with unspoken tension as the senators gathered in the portico, their voices low and their eyes avoiding mine. Caesar entered the room and took his seat upon the golden chair prepared for him. Feeling the weight of the day settle into his bones, the conspirators moved closer, their faces hidden behind masks of feigned concern and friendship, their hands reaching for the daggers hidden beneath their togas. They surrounded him and struck him with their blades in a sudden and violent attack. The metal flashing in the dim light of the hall, the great leader fell to the floor, his life ending in a pool of blood on the stone, the red spreading slowly across the white marble. The Ides of March and Caesar's assassination marked the end of an era and the beginning of chaos, a descent into violence that would tear the empire apart. His body lay still while the senators fled in panic, leaving the hall in disarray, their screams echoing off the walls as they ran for the doors. The news of his death spread quickly through the city, causing shock and grief among the populace, who wept for the man who had promised them peace and stability in uncertain times. His death left a void that no single individual could easily fill in the years that followed, a silence that grew louder with each passing day. The empire he had built began to fracture, the bonds of loyalty dissolving into the blood of civil war that would engulf the Mediterranean. The conflict was not merely a struggle for power, but a fundamental clash over the future of the Roman state, a war that would reshape the world. His opponents, including Cassius and Marcus Brutus, controlled vast territories stretching from Syria to Macedonia, commanding large forces of cavalry and sailors. They marshaled more than 20 legions of infantry, their ranks filled with men who believed they were fighting for the Republic. The political environment remained volatile even after Caesar secured victory in the civil wars, for the wounds of the past were deep and slow to heal. He faced constant threats from senators who feared his growing authority and potential kingship, their paranoia feeding the fires of conflict. The assassination of Caesar in 44 BCE was the culmination of these fears and the breakdown of republican norms, a final attempt to save a dying system. His murderers believed they were restoring the Republic, but their actions only accelerated its collapse, proving that violence had become the primary language of politics. Trebonius, one of Caesar's murderers, was eventually conquered in the province of Asia during these conflicts, his fate sealed by the very forces he had unleashed. Decimus Brutus suffered a similar fate in Gaul as the forces of the Second Triumvirate hunted down the conspirators, their names becoming synonymous with betrayal. The vengeance that overtook Cassius and Marcus Brutus marked the end of the old republican order, paving the way for the rise of the Roman Empire under Augustus. The transition from republic to empire was a slow and painful process filled with bloodshed and betrayal, a long night that seemed to have no end. The historical record shows how the institutions of the Republic could not withstand the pressures of imperial ambition, crumbling under the weight of their own contradictions. Caesar's life and death remain central to understanding this pivotal moment in Western history, a turning point that changed the course of civilization. The sources available to modern historians often contain gaps or uncertainties regarding specific details of daily life, leaving much to the imagination. Some texts focus on the Claudian family rather than providing a complete account of the events, obscuring the true nature of the struggle. The fire in the hearth has burned low, leaving only the soft, rhythmic crackle of embers that dance in the darkness. Outside, the rain falls gently against the stone walls of the villa, a sound that has echoed through centuries, washing away the dust of battle and the noise of the forum. Here, in this quiet moment, the weight of the toga feels lighter, the burden of the laurel crown less pressing. I am not the general, nor the dictator, nor the conqueror of Gaul. I am simply a man resting, listening to the rhythm of the world as it turns without my command. The air in the office grew heavy with the scent of fresh ink and the dry dust of unrolled maps. I remember the weight of the purple bordered toga resting on my shoulders, a garment that felt less like cloth and more like a chain of responsibility. The days stretched long and slow, filled with the endless parade of petitioners who sought favor, land, or justice. Their voices were a constant hum, a river of human need that never ceased to flow through the marble halls. I sat behind the desk, my hand moving across the papyrus, signing decrees that would reshape the world. The scratching of the reed pen against the rough surface was a sound I came to know, as well as the beating of my own heart. Every stroke of the pen was decision that would echo through the centuries, a choice that bound the future to the present moment. The silence between the requests was filled with the distant roar of the crowd in the forum, a reminder of the fragile nature of the peace I tried to maintain. The calendar itself was a mess of confusion, a chaotic collection of days and months that no longer matched the turning of the earth. Farmers could not tell when to sow their seeds, and priests could not predict the proper times for sacrifice. I looked at the old system and saw a structure that had collapsed under its own weight, unable to support the vast empire that had grown around it. The solution required a clear mind and a steady hand, for to change the time was to change the rhythm of life itself. I gathered the best astronomers from Alexandria, men who had studied the stars for generations, and we sat in the quiet of the library to chart a new course. The air smelled of oil and old stone, and the light from the high windows fell in soft beams across the tables covered in charts. We calculated the length of the solar year with a precision that had never been attempted before, measuring the sun's journey with a new kind of accuracy. The old Roman year had drifted far from the seasons, and it was my task to pull it back into alignment. I ordered the insertion of extra days and months to correct the error, a bold move that would reset the clock for all of Rome. The people were confused at first, but soon they accepted the new rhythm, finding comfort in a system that finally made sense of the sky. The Julian calendar became a gift to the world, a tool that allowed the empire to function with a shared understanding of time. Even today, the names of the months and the structure of the year bear the mark of that long winter of calculation. The bronze statue that stood in the center of the forum was a silent witness to the changes that were taking place. It was a figure of a man in a toga, his hand raised in a gesture of command, his face carved with the stern lines of duty. The sun set behind it, casting a long shadow that stretched across the cobblestones, reaching out to touch the feet of the people who passed by. The metal was cool to the touch, and the patina of age gave it a deep, greenish hue that seemed to absorb the light. I would often stand before it in the evening, watching the shadows lengthen and the first stars appear in the darkening sky. The statue did not speak, yet it seemed to hold the weight of the entire republic within its stillness. It was a reminder that the power I held was not mine alone, but a trust given by the people and the gods. The city around it was alive with the sounds of the evening, the clatter of carts, the laughter of children, and the low murmur of conversations in the taverns. Life continued in its steady rhythm, unaware of the vast changes that were being woven into the fabric of the state. The reforms I enacted were not just laws, but a new way of seeing the world, a new way of organizing the chaos of human existence. I saw the potential for a society that could function with order and fairness, where the rights of the citizen were protected by the strength of the law. The land was distributed to the veterans, giving them a stake in the future of Rome, a piece of earth to call their own. The debt was restructured, easing the burden on those who had fallen into ruin, allowing them to start again with hope in their hearts. The courts were reformed to ensure that justice was not the privilege of the few, but a right for all. These changes were made with a quiet determination, without the fanfare of triumph or the noise of celebration. They were simply the necessary steps to build a foundation that could last for generations. The bronze statue that stood in the center of the forum was a silent witness to the changes that were taking place. It was a figure of a man in a toga, his hand raised in a gesture of command, his face carved with the stern lines of duty. The sun set behind it, casting a long shadow that stretched across the cobblestones, reaching out to touch the feet of the people who passed by. The metal was cool to the touch, and the patina of age gave it a deep, greenish hue that seemed to absorb the light. I would often stand before it in the evening, watching the shadows lengthen and the first stars appear in the darkening sky. The statue did not speak, yet it seemed to hold the weight of the entire republic within its stillness. It was a reminder that the power I held was not mine alone, but a trust given by the people and the gods. The city around it was alive with the sounds of the evening, the clatter of carts, the laughter of children, and the low murmur of conversations in the taverns. Life continued in its steady rhythm, unaware of the vast changes that were being woven into the fabric of the state. The reforms I enacted were not just laws, but a new way of seeing the world, a new way of organizing the chaos of human existence. I saw the potential for a society that could function with order and fairness, where the rights of the citizen were protected by the strength of the law. The land was distributed to the veterans, giving them a stake in the future of Rome, a piece of earth to call their own. The debt was restructured, easing the burden on those who had fallen into ruin, allowing them to start again with hope in their hearts. The courts were reformed to ensure that justice was not the privilege of the few, but a right for all. These changes were made with a quiet determination, without the fanfare of triumph or the noise of celebration. They were simply the necessary steps to build a foundation that could last for generations. The opposition to these changes was fierce, born of fear and the desire to hold on to the old ways. The senators whispered in the shadows, their eyes filled with suspicion and resentment. They saw my reforms as a threat to their power, as a challenge to the traditions that had guided Rome for centuries. I heard their words, but I did not let them sway me from the path I had chosen. The future of the Republic depended on my ability to see beyond the immediate interests of the few and to act for the good of the many. I walked through the streets of Rome, observing the lives of the people, listening to their stories, and feeling the pulse of the city. I saw the poverty, the hunger, and the despair that plagued the lower classes, and I knew that something had to be done. The reforms were not just a political strategy, but a moral imperative, a duty to the people who had trusted me with their lives. I remembered the words of Sulla, who had warned me that I would be a danger to the state, and I understood the truth in his prophecy. The power I held was a double-edged sword, capable of both great good and great harm. I chose to wield it with care, with a sense of responsibility that never left my side. The legacy of these actions would outlast my life, shaping the course of history for centuries to come. The title of Caesar would become a symbol of supreme power, used by emperors and kings across the world. The word itself would evolve, changing in pronunciation and meaning, but its roots would always trace back to this moment in time. The news of the death spread quickly through the city, causing a shock that rippled through every street and forum. People wept for the man who had promised them peace in such uncertain times, leaving a void no single soul could fill. The empire I had built began to divide among heirs and rivals, yet the surveying project I started remained unfinished, waiting for a new leader to complete it. My writings survived the violence and continued to be read by students and scholars for centuries, outlasting the steel that ended my life. The man who changed the course of history was gone, but the influence remained strong, settling into the foundations of the world like sediment in a riverbed. The room where the final act took place grew quiet, filled only with the soft light of the afternoon sun. Dust motes danced in the beams that fell through the high windows of the portico, moving with a slow, hypnotic grace. The marble floor was cool and smooth beneath, the feet of those who walked there slowly, each step echoing the weight of the past. A single statue of a Greek philosopher stood in the corner, watching the empty space with stone eyes that held no judgment. The air smelled faintly of oil and old parchment, the scent of a library left undisturbed for 1,000 years. Shadows stretched long across the walls as the day began to fade into evening, turning the white stone to a soft shade of gold. The silence was deep and complete, broken only by the distant sound of a bird calling outside, a lonely note in the vast quiet. The golden chair remained empty, a silent reminder of the man who had once sat there, now only a memory. The daggers were gone, taken away by the conspirators who had fled into the night, leaving no trace of their fear. The blood had been washed away, leaving no mark of the violence that had occurred there, as if the earth itself had absorbed the shock. The room felt peaceful again, as if the storm had passed and the world had returned to its natural calm. The light shifted slowly, warming the stone columns with a gentle, golden hue. The statue seemed to lean forward slightly, as if listening to the quiet breathing of the room. The dust settled gently on the floor, covering the marks of the struggle that had taken place, hiding the chaos from view. The air was still and heavy, holding the memory of the day in its stillness, preserving the moment forever. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows that reached across the empty floor, stretching toward the horizon. The room waited in silence for the next chapter to begin, patient and unafraid of the coming night. My legacy was not built on the traditional art of painting or sculpture, but on the art of leadership and statecraft that shaped a civilization. I shaped the destiny of Rome through a combination of force, diplomacy, and the written word, creating a framework that would endure for millennia. The lessons learned in my youth guided my actions throughout my entire career as a statesman and general, teaching me to navigate both peace and war with equal skill. My refusal to yield to Sulla set a precedent for my future resistance against tyranny and political oppression, a choice that defined my character. The prediction made by Sulla proved accurate, yet the man remained a figure of immense fascination for students of history and governance. His name became synonymous with leadership and the complex nature of political authority in any age, a title that echoed through the corridors of power. The legacy of Caesar extended far beyond the borders of the Roman Empire itself, permeating European culture, law, and language for many centuries following my death. The title of Kaiser and Tsar derived directly from my name to denote supreme imperial power, a linguistic evolution that proved the lasting impact of my identity on the collective consciousness of nations. Modern scholars continue to analyze my writings and actions with fresh perspectives and new methodologies, finding new layers of meaning in the old text. The debate over my true intentions remains as lively today as it was in antiquity, a testament to the complexity of the human spirit. My life serves as a mirror for societies to examine their own values and fears regarding authority, reflecting their own struggles back at them. The story of my rise and fall offers a timeless lesson on the fragility of political systems, reminding observers that even the most powerful individuals are subject to the whims of history. The silence in the historical record regarding my sleep habits does not diminish my monumental presence, allowing the focus to remain on the vast scope of my public achievements. The world I shaped continued to evolve long after my physical presence had vanished from the earth, carried forward by the hands of those who followed. My memory was preserved in stone, text, and the very structure of the calendar itself, marking the passage of time with my name. The bronze statue erected by the Senate stood as a silent witness to the passage of time, watching over the city that I had transformed. It watched over the empire that my hair would build, a guardian of the past looking toward the future. The surveying project I began eventually mapped the world with a precision that aided future generations, connecting distant provinces to the heart of Rome through a shared understanding of space. This work stood as a framework for Roman administration and expansion, a tool that guided the course of history. The relationship with Cleopatra added a layer of cultural richness to my political achievements, bridging two great civilizations in a moment of shared vision. The dedication of Suetonius's work ensured that these stories would be preserved for future generations, keeping the flame of memory alive. The quiet diligence of the surveyors and the public nature of the Acta Diurna reflected a society in transition, moving toward a new order. The civic crown remained a symbol of the personal courage that underpinned my public life, a badge of honor earned through risk and resolve. The conquest of Gaul provided the material basis for the administrative reforms I later implemented, turning victory into governance. The astronomical surveying system allowed for a level of precision previously unseen in Roman geography, mapping the stars and the land with equal care. The rapid communication of news helped to unify the diverse populations under Roman rule, binding the empire together with threads of information. The legacy of these works continues to inform our understanding of the ancient world today, a bridge across the centuries. The late afternoon sun cast long, golden shadows across the marble floor of the library in Alexandria, where the great works of the past were preserved. Dust motes danced slowly